Hi everyone, Gundam here for a 50-second and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today we're going to the 1-year war era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we're going to explore all the variants of the Dolos-class supercarrier, how much they differ from the regular model, when did they appear, and extract every bit of mechanical knowledge we have on them so far. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Dolos-class? A super large space carrier developed by the Principality of Zion, the Dolos was a three-of-a-type kind of supercarrier, serving as the ultimate space vessel of the Zion Space Attack Force for the entirety of the 1-year war. Labeled as a heavy-duty transport mothership, the Dolos-class was a ship created in the final month preceding the 1-year war, being developed from an interplanetary vessel once used by the Jupiter Energy Fleet and designed in secret around December UC-78, being conceptualized as a gigantesque tactical space asset to serve as Zion's super weapon. Indeed, the Dolos was a ship of massive dimensions for its time, with a total length of 495 meters for a width of 352 meters, thus dwarfing any ship in both the Federation and Zion's arsenal at that time, save from the neutral Jupiter-class transport vessels. This size, also making the Dolos-class closer to a small mobile space fortress than a ship, didn't stunt the ship's mobility, with the Dolos being outfitted with a total of 9 powerful rear engines, enabling it not only to cruise for long periods of time with speeds comparable to much smaller ships, but also to move itself vertically, something rare among Zion Navy vessels. Some sources however mentions that the Dolos thrusters suffered from multiple design flaws, notably an inadequacy with the chosen ship design and weight, making the Dolos struggle to reach certain accelerations and maintain them, thus reducing its overall cruising abilities. The Dolos' main strength and primary asset however remain its massive size, filling its internal space with gigantesque hangars, reason behind its classification as a super large space carrier. These hangars were filled with hundreds of meter squares worth of mobile suit repairing docks, stockage compartments and even armories, enabling the ship to sustain the needs of a total of 182 mobile suits, or just 100 mobile suits if transporting large models, alongside a surplus of at the very least 50 Gator-class fighters, a carrying capacity never reached by any other ship in the Universal Century. According to Gear and Grid, the Dolos was also fully capable of tending to the needs of a large number of mobile armors, and even better, was the only Zion's movable facility capable of hosting the Big Zam in its belly. This nightmarish amount of transport machines could then be literally vomited by the Dolos on the battlefield, with the hangars connecting to a total of 7 front entries, enabling the mass launch of entire formation of Gators, mobile suit squads and even mobile armors. In terms of firepower, the Dolos was also a powerhouse of its own, being said to rival even small space fortresses in terms of beam-based arsenal. On each of its sides, the Dolos mounted 3 twin-barrel large-caliber mega-particle cannons, so a total of 6 turrets, granting the supercarrier exceptional sideway firepower. These cannons, although incapable of firing frontally because of their rotation axis, could still be turned to all fire diagonally, enabling the Dolos to still attack enemy ship formations coming from the front while deploying all its troops without risk of hitting them. In addition to that, the Dolos also equips a pair of rear secondary twin-barrel turrets of slightly larger dimension than its side turrets, enabling the ship to cover its rear while retreating. In terms of anti-air defenses, the Dolos was however given the short end of the stick, mounting a mere complement of 2 twin-barrel machine gun turrets placed on the upper hull. These machine guns were of a caliber similar to regular mega-particle cannons, enabling them to shred through enemy formations like they were hot butter, yes, but at the cost of slow rotations and poor coverage, making their usefulness rather questionable. Why exactly was the Dolos outfitted with only these turrets is unknown, but a commonly accepted theory is that with its size, firepower and massive support of troops in its belly, the Dolos was considered untouchable by enemy mobile suit attacks, with entire Federation battle groups and fleets being required to even hope to take one down. What I'm trying to say is that with the Dolos being created early on during the war, when the Federation didn't add any mobile suit yet, the Zeon shipyards concluded that even if the Federation did pump out mobile suits on their own, they would still require massive ship support to attack at Dolos, hence why the class received all these beam cannons to hold the ground against enemy fleets, while leaving enemy mobile suits to be picked up by its own complement of troops. Finally, the Dolos' last and most overshadowed asset was its reliance on a total of 10 control stations scattered across its hull, with one enclosed bridge on its front, serving as the main bridge, one guidance station jutting from an arm-like structure directing all mobile suit launch, and 8 additional smaller control stations hanging all around and providing additional support. Thanks to these numerous command structures, each coming with their own crew, the Dolos could easily survey and assess the battlefield from different positions, coordinating independently but jointly various mobile suit launches and artillery volleys, while also rendering the ship very hard to sink due to the continuous command structures surviving as long as one control center remained. In terms of production, the Dolos would remain one of the rarest and costlier vessels of the entire one-year war, if not the universal century, with only 3 of such vessels being produced and only 2 seeing the light of the day outside of the shipyard. The first ship of the line, the named ship Dolos, would spend most of the war in the Zeon mainland, only leaving, according to some sources, early on to participate in the Battle of Loom, eventually becoming Giren Zabi's pride and joy, thus serving as his primary mobile base and personal command vessel for most of the later stages of the one-year war. By the end of the war, during the Battle of Abawaku, the Dolos would prove to be one of Zeon's most important tactical assets, holding by itself the Enfield against the Federation fleets, with its might and mobile suit complement crushing countless Federation squadrons. The Dolos would prove to be a nightmare until around 9 o'clock, when the Dolos would then come under fire from the combined forces of a large Salamis-class battle group alongside Federation Top 1 ace 10FA Young, a last attack that would eventually prove to be the underdoing of the Dolos, with the ship sinking 40 minutes later after nearly 2 hours of continuous and sustained fire. The destruction of the Dolos would mark the start of the Principality's defeat at Abawaku, resulting in the Enfield being breached and a massive loss of morale surging as Giren Zabi was widely believed to be on the Dolos itself, with his assassination by Kycilia Zabi being mixed with him dying on the Dolos due to widespread panic and miscommunications. The second ship of the line, the Doloa, was instead commissioned much later than the Dolos itself, in July UC-79, being assembled by the Granada Arsenal under the jurisdiction of Kycilia Zabi, until the ship was later reassigned to Solomon under the Zeon Space Navy, as Kycilia gifted it to Dozel Zabi in exchange of his approval for the formation of a submarine fleet at the California base. Now under Dozel's jurisdiction, the Doloa would resume constructions and become Solomon's primary asset, becoming the mothership of many ace pilots such as Ana Velgato. The Doloa, completed in extremis during the Battle of Solomon, would however survive the infamous battle, retreating back to Abawaku while being covered by Gato, which is where Gato got to earn himself the moniker of Nightmare of Solomon. During the Battle of Abawaku, the Doloa would instead hold the S-field, being considered alongside the Dolos as the 2 pillars that needed to stand to protect the space fortress. Unfortunately, the Doloa would also be destroyed by Federation prolonged fire, falling exactly 1 hour after the Dolos, a turn-off event that caused the S-field to collapse and Gato retreating with the last upon hearing the news. However, the Doloa was not properly sunk per se, with the ship propulsion being crippled, its battery immobilized and neutralized, and its command structure destroyed, but the ship however remaining functional, with many Zeon soldiers regrouping inside the Doloa before escaping the Abawaku airspace. Aside these 2 ships, a third ship, the Midolo, is mentioned in the novel version of Gundam and some other sources, which could lead to a general assumption that a third Dolos may have indeed been in preparation, but never got finished in time. After the end of the one-year war, the Dolos-class was abandoned altogether, with the class being never reintroduced or extended with any kind of indirect successor. On the flip side, his design concept as a supercarrier was later on revisited by many factions, with the Titan's Dogose gear being said to mix Dolos and Magellan design aspects, and Axis Zeon Guadan instead mixing Dolos and Guazin aspects. But that's enough setting for today, let's get to our variants. Before we start covering the few variations of the Dolos, I think it is best to be bluntly honest and transparent with you all. There are no real variations of the Dolos, so if you came here expecting a Dolos 2 or a Dolos-Sky, you're heading toward a disappointment. This, however, doesn't mean that the Dolos design hasn't changed quite a bit amongst the various alternative UC continuities, the more proficient ones, the Origin and the Thunderbolt continuities, proposing slightly yet very interesting variations of the Gargantuan class. Let's start by the Origin version of the Dolos. In the Origin continuity, which is itself a different retelling of the One-Year War events by Yoshikatsu Yasuhiko and separate from mainline UC, the Dolos-class makes a significant appearance, with its design clearly showcasing how Origin set itself as its own proper continuity. The Origin Dolos can, at first glance, seem to be completely identical to its mainline UC counterpart, sharing the same overall design, armaments, number of hangars, with the only notable difference being the number of its control stations, the Origin Dolos only possessing 8 of them, removing 2 from its underhull. This slight difference is, however, laughable when considering the main and primary difference between regular Dolos and the Origin redesign, difference primarily residing in the dimensions. While the regular Dolos has been in numerous sources stated as being 495 meters long and at the very least 492 meters long in some other sources, the Origin version of the Dolos reached absurd proportions, making it nearly 15 times bigger, being estimated as being 7 kilometers long. With such demential size, the Origin Dolos is even more of a game-changing super weapon, being able to store far more mobile suits, mobile armors, troops, and thus leaning even more in the movable space fortress side than any type of proper ship, even as a supercarrier. More astonishing, this Dolos retains the use of its traditional 7 hangars, upsized to the point of being able to dock and host light and heavy cruisers such as the Musayon Chivei, but even larger classes such as the Zanzibar, turning the Dolos class into a ship carrier more than a super large mobile suit carrier. This general upsizing also leads to the Origin Dolos having far larger and longer megaparticle cannons, with the regular Dolos firepower, already impressive in mainland UC, being dramatically overpowered in Origin, the Dolos being able to snipe Federation fleets outside the range and even one-shoot Magellan-class battleships with a single one of its turrets. The last difference with the regular UC counterpart is that the Origin Dolos also seem to be a one-of-a-kind vessel, rather than a ship producing a 2 or 3 vessel run, which means the Origin continuity has only the Dolos, so bye-bye Doloa, bye-bye Midolo. Now about the deployment history of that thing. In the Origin retelling of the Battle of Abawaku, the Dolos evaded the fate of its regular UC counterpart, coming under fire from Federation fleets, yes, but not collapsing from their attack, instead remaining unscathed before butchering them all. It's the Origin continuity, never forget that. What happens instead is that when Kishiazabi attempted to board the Dolos with her own Chivei, the Purple Widow, Shah Aznavour sniped the bridge of her ship, killing her and causing the cruiser to explode as it was entering one of the Dolos hangars. This started a chain reaction that caused the Dolos to explode from the inside and then crash over Abawaku, causing massive damage that enabled the Federation to turn the tide of the battle in its favor. Yeah, as always with Origin, it always comes down to Char and his portrayal as a Marisu in the manga. Yes guys, in Origin, the Federation won the battle only because Mr. Char destroyed the Dolos indirectly, and not because the Federation sacrificed blood and lives to take down the 2 Dolos and bridge to different fields to get to Abawaku. Funnily enough, a single portrayal of the Dolos in mainline UC in the Missing Link manga seems to be closer to the Origin dimensions for it than the mainline continuity dimensions, which has led some people considering that this manga particularly is either also part of the Origin continuity or, well, more simply introduced a continuity error. But well, let's continue our exploration of the alternative redesigns of the Dolos, this time with the second and last existing variant from the second continuity mentioned before, the realm of Phrygia's and sped-up technological advancement, the Thunderbolt continuity. In the Thunderbolt universe, which is also separate from the mainline UC as a different retelling, the Dolos also makes an appearance but in the second part of the story, remaining a super large carrier, while this time adopting dimensions similar to the Origin version of the Dolos. Now, while the Thunderbolt Dolos seems to be a sort of second coming of the origin Dolos, the Thunderbolt redesign greatly differs when it comes to the ship environmental assignation, with, hear me out, the Dolos being presented as an enormous submarine tender and underwater base used by the Zeon remnants after the 1-year war. Now, before jumping from a cliff, we don't exactly know what exactly was on with that Dolos specifically, because, let's be honest, the Thunderbolt author used it for shock value, and because it was cool, but then destroyed it when he got bored without giving any more context. What I'm trying to convey is that it isn't completely clear if in the Thunderbolt continuity, the Dolos was not a spaceship supercarrier and was instead designed in the first place as a submarine carrier, or if it was indeed a spaceship first that was later equipped with a Minovsky craft system and then went into hiding deep under Earth's oceans. For our common mental state, I prefer to think that the Thunderbolt Dolos was, in this particular universe, always designed as an amphibious base, which could explain why the facility isn't flooding constantly, why it works so well with the rest of the Zeon Remnant's amphibious vehicles and equipment, and why it has so many functional flashlights on its various command centers. This could also explain why the Thunderbolt Dolos doesn't have any of the original megaparticle cannons, but this could also mean that they simply removed them. The fact that said Dolos is also anchored to the seafloor in the manga also goes in the direction suggesting this isn't a proper submarine asset in the first place. Shame. In any case, the Thunderbolt Dolos fills a similar role to the origin version, being a ship carrier and a central command facility, hosting in its belly the various Jukon and Mad Anglo-class submarines used by the Zeon remnants in that story. Aside this, the Thunderbolt Dolos also serves as the base and new home of said Zeon remnants, being also outfitted with some rather luxurious features such as a whole green garden for beekeeping, where the group attempts to make scientist Carla Mitchum recover from her trauma. Now about the fate of that sunken behemoth. When Dero joins the Zeon remnants on Earth after the 1-year war during the second part of the Thunderbolt manga, the young crippled pilot became part, for a time, of the Zeon remnants faction based on said Dolos, before becoming disgruntled with the idea of Zeon and defecting to the Southeast Alliance, but not before sabotaging the Dolos, causing the ship to explode. The common structure of the Dolos would still manage to evacuate, but would later be killed off by Dero after they attempted to confront him. Other than that, nothing else is known about the Thunderbolt Dolos, which in itself remains one of the biggest grip I have with Thunderbolt, always using designs because they are cool and not because they are appropriate to the narrative. With this sour conclusion, this video comes to an end. Marcon cuts out.
But who will survive?